Welcome to the Discourse Analyzer AI Toolkit, where articles come alive. You're listening to the audio version of our article. For the full text and an interactive experience, check out the link in the description below. Interact with any selection using our AI assistant to enhance your understanding. Let's explore.
Power and knowledge in discourse analysis. The relationship between power and knowledge is a central theme in discourse analysis, particularly in the work of Michel Foucault. Discourse analysis explores how language is used to construct, maintain, and challenge power dynamics and how knowledge is produced, distributed, and controlled through discourse. The concept of power, knowledge highlights that power is not just exercised through overt control or force but is also embedded in the ways we come to know and understand the world through discourse. 1. Key concepts of power and knowledge in discourse analysis. Power, knowledge. Foucault's concept. Michel Foucault introduced the idea that power and knowledge are intertwined, coining the term power, knowledge, to emphasize that knowledge is not neutral but is produced within power relations. Power is exercised through the production of knowledge, and knowledge, in turn, reinforces power structures. Power as productive. Foucault argued that power is not just repressive but also productive. It shapes what is considered true or false, normal or abnormal, and influences how people behave and think. Discursive formation. Knowledge is produced within specific discourses, which are governed by rules about what can be said, who can speak, and what counts as truth. These discourses, in turn, reinforce the power structures that produce them. Example: in the field of medicine, the discourse surrounding mental health has shifted over time. What was once labeled as hysteria in women, for example, is now understood in terms of specific psychological conditions. This shift in knowledge reflects changes in power relations, including the role of women in society and the authority of medical professionals. Control of discourse. Power is exercised through control over discourse, who gets to speak, what can be said, and how it is said. Those in positions of power often control the dominant discourse, which influences how knowledge is produced and disseminated. Gatekeeping. Certain institutions, such as the media, education systems, and governments, act as gatekeepers, determining which discourses are legitimized and which are marginalized. Framing. The way issues are framed in discourse, through specific language choices, emphasis, and omission, reflects and reinforces power dynamics. Example: media organizations often control the discourse on immigration by choosing how to frame the issue. Describing immigrants as illegal aliens versus undocumented workers reflects different power dynamics and ideological positions, influencing public perception and policy. Resistance and counter-discourses. While power operates through dominant discourses, resistance is also possible through the creation and promotion of counter-discourses. These alternative ways of speaking and thinking challenge dominant power structures and propose new forms of knowledge. Subaltern voices. Groups marginalized by dominant discourses often develop their own counter-discourses as a form of resistance. These discourses provide alternative narratives that challenge the status quo. Reappropriation. Discourses can be reappropriated by those in less powerful positions to subvert and challenge the meanings imposed by dominant groups. Example: the feminist movement has developed counter-discourses that challenge traditional gender roles and patriarchal power structures. By promoting concepts like gender equality and toxic masculinity, feminists have reshaped public discourse and influenced social change. Disciplinary power and surveillance. Foucault introduced the concept of disciplinary power, which operates through surveillance and normalization rather than through direct force. This form of power is exercised in institutions like schools, hospitals, and prisons, where individuals are constantly monitored and evaluated according to certain norms. Normalization. Disciplinary power works by establishing norms of behavior and thought, against which individuals are measured. Those who deviate from these norms are subjected to corrective measures. Panopticism. The idea of the panopticon, A theoretical prison design where inmates are always visible to a central guard but cannot see the guard themselves, illustrates how surveillance functions as a form of power. People internalize the norms and regulate their own behavior as if they are always being watched. Example: in educational institutions, students are often subject to surveillance through grading, attendance tracking, and behavioral evaluations. These practices not only monitor but also shape students' behavior, encouraging conformity to institutional norms. Point 2. Examples of power and knowledge in discourse analysis. Example 1. Medical discourse and authority. In the field of medicine, discourse shapes both the production of knowledge and the exercise of power. Medical professionals hold authority over what is considered healthy or sick, and their discourse influences patient behavior, public health policies, and societal norms. Power, knowledge. The authority of medical professionals is reinforced through their control over medical knowledge. When doctors diagnose a condition, prescribe treatments, or set health guidelines, they are exercising power by defining what constitutes health and illness. Framing and control. The way diseases are framed in medical discourse can also reflect power dynamics. For example, the framing of obesity as a personal failure versus a public health issue reflects different ideological positions and influences how society responds to it. Counter-discourse. Patient advocacy groups sometimes challenge medical authority by promoting alternative understandings of health and illness, such as holistic health practices or critiques of the pharmaceutical industry's influence on medical discourse. Example 2. Media discourse on war. Media discourse plays a crucial role in shaping public knowledge and opinion about war. The language used in news reports, speeches, and official statements can reflect and reinforce power structures by framing the conflict in certain ways. Framing. During wartime, media outlets often use specific language to frame the conflict, such as describing one side as freedom fighters and the other as terrorists. These frames are not neutral but reflect underlying power dynamics and ideological positions. Control of discourse. Governments and military institutions often control the flow of information during war, determining what is reported and how it is presented to the public. This control shapes public perception and justifies military actions. Example: the discourse surrounding the Iraq War was shaped by the use of terms like weapons of mass destruction and regime change, which framed the invasion as necessary and justified. These discourses reflected and reinforced the power of the governments involved, influencing public opinion in international relations. Example 3. Educational discourse and social control. Educational institutions are key sites where discourse shapes both knowledge and power. The language used in educational settings, from textbooks to classroom interactions, plays a significant role in socializing students and transmitting cultural values. Disciplinary power. Schools often exercise disciplinary power through surveillance and normalization. Students are taught not only academic content but also how to behave, think, and conform to social norms. Production of knowledge. The curriculum and the way it is taught reflect the dominant discourse, often prioritizing certain types of knowledge while marginalizing others. This process reinforces the power structures that determine what is considered valuable or legitimate knowledge. Example: the way history is taught in schools can reflect nationalistic or patriotic discourses, emphasizing certain events or figures while downplaying others. This shaping of historical knowledge reflects broader power dynamics about how a nation views itself and its past. Conclusion: the relationship between power and knowledge is central to discourse analysis, highlighting how language both reflects and constructs social realities. By going beyond the surface level of language, discourse analysis reveals how power is exercised through the production and control of knowledge, how dominant discourses reinforce power structures, and how counter-discourses can challenge them. Whether in media, medicine, education, or everyday interactions, the interplay of power and knowledge is a critical area of study that helps us understand the deeper forces shaping communication, ideology, and society. Frequently asked questions. What is the relationship between power and knowledge in discourse analysis? In discourse analysis, The relationship between power and knowledge is explored through the idea that power is not only exercised through overt control but also embedded in how knowledge is produced, distributed, and controlled. This concept, heavily influenced by Michel Foucault, suggests that power and knowledge are intertwined, meaning that those who control knowledge also wield power, and vice versa. What is Foucault's concept of power, knowledge? Michel Foucault introduced the concept of power, knowledge to emphasize that knowledge is produced within power relations and is not neutral. Power is exercised through the creation and dissemination of knowledge, which in turn reinforces power structures. This means that what is accepted as truth or knowledge is often shaped by those in positions of power. How is power exercised through control of discourse? Power is exercised through control over discourse by determining who gets to speak, what can be said, and how it is said. Institutions like media, education, and government often act as gatekeepers, deciding which discourses are legitimized and which are marginalized. This control influences public perception, policy, and social norms. Can you explain the concept of resistance and counter-discourses? Resistance and counter-discourses refer to the ways in which marginalized groups challenge dominant power structures by creating alternative narratives. These counter-discourses offer different perspectives and knowledge, challenging the status quo and promoting social change. For example, feminist counter-discourses have challenged traditional gender roles and reshaped public discourse on gender equality. What is disciplinary power and how does it relate to discourse analysis? Disciplinary power, a concept introduced by Foucault, operates through surveillance and normalization rather than through direct force. It is exercised in institutions like schools, hospitals, and prisons, where individuals are constantly monitored and evaluated according to certain norms. Discourse analysis explores how this form of power shapes behavior and thought by establishing what is considered normal or deviant. How does discourse analysis reveal power dynamics in medical discourse? In medical discourse, power dynamics are revealed through the authority that medical professionals hold over what is considered healthy or sick. Discourse analysis examines how medical knowledge is produced and controlled, how diseases are framed, and how this influences patient behavior and public health policies. It also explores how counter-discourses, like patient advocacy, challenge traditional medical authority. What role does framing play in media discourse on power and knowledge? Framing in media discourse refers to the way issues are presented and the language used to describe them. This framing reflects and reinforces power dynamics and ideological positions. For example, how the media frames a conflict, e.g., using terms like freedom fighters versus terrorists, can influence public perception and justify certain actions, reflecting underlying power relations. How does educational discourse contribute to social control? Educational discourse contributes to social control by shaping the knowledge that students acquire and the behaviors they adopt. Through curricula, textbooks, and classroom interactions, educational institutions transmit cultural values and social norms, often reflecting the dominant discourse. This process reinforces existing power structures by legitimizing certain types of knowledge and behavior. Can you provide an example of how power, knowledge operates in a specific context? In the context of the Iraq War, the discourse surrounding weapons of mass destruction and regime change was used to frame the invasion as necessary and justified. This discourse, controlled by governments and disseminated by the media, reflected and reinforced the power of the involved governments, influencing public opinion and international relations. Why is the study of power and knowledge important in discourse analysis? The study of power and knowledge is crucial in discourse analysis because it helps reveal the deeper forces that shape communication, ideology, and social relations. By analyzing how language reflects and constructs power dynamics, discourse analysts can uncover how social realities are produced, maintained, and challenged, providing insights into how societies function and evolve. How do counter-discourses challenge dominant power structures? Counter-discourses challenge dominant power structures by offering alternative ways of understanding and talking about issues. These discourses often emerge from marginalized groups and seek to disrupt the established norms and ideologies that maintain the status quo. For example, counter-discourses in environmental activism might challenge the dominant economic discourses that prioritize growth over sustainability. How does Foucault's concept of the panopticon relate to discourse analysis? Foucault's concept of the panopticon relates to discourse analysis by illustrating how surveillance operates as a form of power. In a panopticon, individuals behave as if they are constantly being watched, internalizing norms and regulating their behavior accordingly. Discourse analysis can explore how language and communication practices contribute to this kind of surveillance and self-regulation in various social contexts, such as education or healthcare.